we invested over $2 billion this year on the continent. And as far as our role was discussed a bit earlier on, we try to be first mover and catalyst for industries. And just to give a bit of background and history, IFC made the first investment in GSM in the late 90s, where banks had absolutely no interest in the sector. For instance, also, we invested in MTN in the time when Nigeria had no interest for commercial banks, etc. So ideally, we try to look at what is the next trend and how can we position to be a catalyst in that space. We've realized that there is a shift currently happening in the telecom space. Historically, GSM companies were capturing most of the investments. Now they've reached a certain point of liquidity where the need for banks is more limited. So what is coming next is based on where is the market going. And if you see today, we basically have a situation where voice is not as preponderant as you just mentioned, and where data is becoming of key importance. Now, in terms of voice, the reason why it's not as preponderant is because the competition is getting fiercer. For instance, the entrance of Zain Bharti, of Bharti in the telecom space in Africa is forcing the prices down. So the operators are forced to look at a different model and maintain the ARPU by pushing more data. And I guess the arrival of broadband is helping towards that direction. But how do they reduce their cost? It will be mostly through reducing OPEX via tower infrastructure, tower sharing. So this is what we've been looking at now. First of all, the tower infrastructure space. We've invested over $100 million last year in a tower company. We're looking at doing another 100 million. And it's very early stage, but we believe that most operators are looking into that direction, either setting up their own tower companies or partnering with independent tower companies to share the towers. So, and you need to understand that in an investment for telecoms companies, towers is 60% of the investment cost. So we've looked at that space very carefully, and once again, we've been a catalyst in that space where we invested in Nigeria, in Helios, which now allows more commercial banks to look at the opportunities in that space. And the second tower deal is now bringing more commercial banks into the space, not only in Nigeria, but across Africa. As far as broadband is concerned, indeed, to maintain an acceptable level of ARPUs, operators will have to push data, but also other players who now have large capacity to play with. So we've looked, obviously, at submarine cables. We're one of the leading investors in EASY, East African Submarine Cable. And we're also looking now at backhauls, because ultimately you want to work with the landing points to redistribute the amount of data that is available. So from an investment point of view, there is a shift happening, and we're looking at service providers who will supply either the amount of data or help reduce the OPEX or the CAPEX cost for the telecoms operator. Now, around that space, interestingly enough, we have realized that there are some major opportunities in data center. As the economy of the continent grows, SMEs also are reaching a critical mass in terms of storing their data. And we believe that now that the amount of broadband that is requested to provide this kind of service is available, it should be a very interesting space for us to look at. We're looking at one now in South Africa and a few others in West Africa. And as we speak about data, there is one interesting phenomenon which is related to mobile money. Because ultimately, if you want to capture this amount of data and serve the population, the sector is now converging in terms of not only content, but payments attached to the phone. You need to bear in mind that you have Penetration of banks on the continent is 4%, 4 to 5%, and penetration of mobile phones is exceeding 25% to 30%. So we believe that the mobile phone will become the tool in the next future on the continent for multi-services from data to payments, etc. And you can look at the example of M-Pesa in Kenya. And once again, as earlier the role of IFC was discussed and argued, I just want to mention that IFC was the first investor, whether DFI or commercial, to invest in a mobile money business, which was with Wizit in 2006, 2007. So at this particular stage, when the industry started growing in the early 2000s, it's been 10 years and the cycle is revolving and evolving to different byproducts and side industries that will grow around mobile operators in general. It's interesting also to note that we were talking about internet penetration and the request for data. In Nigeria, the penetration of internet is about 30 million people, which leads to roughly 20% of the population. Right now, out of those 30 million, 28 million people do it through their mobile phones. So we believe that ultimately the position of the mobile phones and the position of the operators may be reinforced. So that's why when you hear about WiMAX and other products like that, we anticipate that because of their cash positioning and their dominant position on the market, mobile operators will ultimately buy many WiMAX or broadband players in Africa. So we also look at, from an equity point of view, at an exit by investing also in broadband providers who will be able to provide the appropriate capacity for a potential exit further down the road. It's very important to bring telecommunication and information back to the real basis of what it is. It's point A communicating with point B. And ultimately, A and B will always be there, and whatever is in between can change. So from an investment point of view, or from a strategy point of view, what I believe and where we've been bringing IFC towards is to always make sure that whatever investments we do, we ensure that who to invest or to have a closer look at who is the end user and who owns the end user. So, and what goes within the pipe. So it's content, like you were saying. So clearly, technologies may evolve every 5 years, and they're moving faster and faster. So from an investor point of view, clearly important to whether whatever the technology it is, does it put point A to point B, and what is the link and the relationship that attach the user or the sender of the information to the technology that is available. So we're also looking at content in that sense in terms of media, because that's what will always be sent through the pipes.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.